Picture the North Atlantic at 3 in the morning. Sea black as polished glass, wind biting, and somewhere below the surface, a 150-meter steel shadow slides past an undersea cable like a cat walking between chair legs. No wake, no windows, just a pressurized heartbeat and a row of silent giants in their tubes. That shadow is British, and its job is very simple. Make sure no one, anywhere, thinks a bolt from the blue is a good idea. If you want to understand British power, begin here, with a submarine whose patrol schedule reads, every day since 1969. It is the country's most decisive capability, not because it fires, but because it doesn't have to. But the United Kingdom's military is not a one-trick ghost. It is a compact, globally wired, technologically thick force that can sprint a carrier group across oceans, drop a battle group on NATO's eastern flank, and still have a commando unit poking around a hostile coast, while an analyst in Gloucestershire reaches through a fibre line and politely ruins an adversary's weekend. If the United States is a sledgehammer and France is a rapier, Britain is a scalpel with a sledgehammer in the trunk. The question isn't whether the UK is powerful. The question is where you feel it first. Underwater, in the air, or when a small grey ship you didn't notice yesterday turns out to be very interested in your radar picture today. Let's set the table. Britain's military DNA is maritime first and alliance-centric. The island story never went away. It just traded sailcloth for composites and sextants for star trackers. The Navy protects the sea lanes, the Air Force reaches deep and sees wide, the Army shows up where allies need weight. And all of it is stitched into NATO, Five Eyes, AUKUS, and the Joint Expeditionary Force with the Nordics. The crown jewel is the nuclear deterrent. 4 ballistic missile submarines rotating through the continuous at-sea deterrent so that one is always out there, somewhere. That's not theatre. That's a standing guarantee that rashness meets consequences. If you want a sardonic British joke, here's one. We schedule our existential threats, one boat at a time. The successor program, Dreadnought, keeps that calm promise alive into the 2050s and beyond. Bigger, stealthier, and designed in lockstep with national industry, it is as much an economic project as it is a military one. The nuclear enterprise spans physicists, welders, coders, engineers, and the sort of fastidious people who treat a millimeter like a mountain. That's the pattern you'll see again and again. British power is a fusion of niche excellence and hard-learned pragmatism. When numbers are tight, quality and integration have to do the lifting. Now pivot to the surface fleet, because the UK didn't just build a submarine fleet and call it a day. It built 2 aircraft carriers, HMS Queen Elizabeth and HMS Prince of Wales, each a 65,000-ton statement that the country can generate 5th-generation air power at sea without asking to borrow anyone's runway. They operate the F-35B, a stealthy vertical/short takeoff jet that can leave from a ski jump and come back like a hummingbird landing on a thimble. Around those carriers, Type 45 destroyers bring some of the best area air defense capability afloat, and frigates, older Type 23 giving way to brand new Type 26 and Type 31 classes, build out the screen. If the carrier is the stage, the destroyers and frigates are the bodyguards and the sound system. Together, they sail far, fight smart, and plug into allied networks from the Mediterranean to the Philippine Sea. The evolution of those escorts matters. Type 26 City-class frigates are submarine hunters with very long legs and very quiet feet, purpose-built for the cat and mouse of the North Atlantic. Type 31 Inspiration-class frigates focus on general-purpose duties, maritime security, presence missions, escort work, and the kind of tasks where having an extra hull is the difference between being there and writing a stern letter from home. The Royal Navy learned the hard way that you can't surge ships from a brochure. You have to build them, crew them, and maintain them, and that takes time and money. The shipyards in Scotland and the refit facilities in England are the industrial lungs behind the fleet's breath. Under the surface, the Astute-class nuclear attack submarines are frankly menacing. They carry torpedoes for when things get personal, and Tomahawk cruise missiles for when things get political. They shadow, they strike, they listen, and their existence makes an opponent's navy paranoid on its best day. On the horizon sits the SSN AUKUS program, a shared design and industrial pact with the United States and Australia that ties three democracies together under the waves for half a century. For London, that means access to technology, shared burden on exquisite parts of the supply chain, and a seat at the table in the Indo-Pacific, without having to shout to be heard. During all this, Britain has been quietly building a locksmith for the ocean floor. RFA Proteus, the first modern ocean surveillance ship of its kind, acts as a mothership for unmanned systems to inspect, protect, or, if necessary, complicate activity around seabed cables and pipelines. The undersea internet is the bloodstream of commerce and intelligence. Guard it, and you guard prosperity. Threaten it, and you can cause chaos. Knowing the difference in time to act, that's power. The Royal Marines have rewritten their playbook, trading massed amphibious landings for a future commando force geared toward literal raiding and surveillance. Think small teams with sensors and teeth, launched from modular motherships, operating by stealth along a coastline and vanishing before a response forms. If the classic image of a Marine is a man in green storming a beach at dawn, the modern variant is a reconnaissance team that already knows who is waiting on that beach and has decided to land 2 bays over at midnight with drones overhead and a missile on call. It's less postcard, more chessboard, and it suits the archipelagos, fjords and cluttered littorals where great power rivalry is getting uncomfortably tactile. Now look up. The Royal Air Force is where Britain's taste for sensors and integration really shines. Typhoon remains the brawler, a fast twin-engine workhorse, but its cockpit view of the world has changed dramatically with modern radars and data links. It can see farther, jam smarter, and shoot meteor beyond visual range missiles that turn "don't even try it" into physics. On the stealth side, the F-35B brings sensor fusion. It isn't just an aircraft, it's a flying server, vacuuming up information and sharing it with ships, ground units, and other jets. Pair that with P-8A Poseidon maritime patrol aircraft sweeping the GIUK gap for submarines, and the North Atlantic becomes much less comfortable for anyone who likes loitering where they shouldn't. The surveillance and command backbone is being rebuilt too. E-7 Wedgetail will restore airborne early warning and control after the retirement of the old E-3 Sentry fleet, giving the RAF the airborne quarterback it needs to choreograph a modern air war. Protector RG-1, an uncrewed aircraft designed to share skies with civilian traffic by the book, adds long-endurance eyes and precision strike, where a manned platform would be an expensive way to be bored for 30 hours. Meanwhile, Rivet Joint Signals Intelligence planes and shadowy ISR fleets knit together an information picture that lets a commander act first and faster. War is speed and decisions. Information buys you both. And then there's logistics, the least glamorous, most decisive part of any military. The RAF's Globemaster and Atlas transports move the mass. Voyager tankers keep fighters drinking from a hose in midair. Helicopters, Chinook for heft, Merlin for maritime, Wildcat for reconnaissance, Apache for trouble, give commanders vertical options when roads are slow, bridges are missing, or the enemy is politely shelling the next turnoff. If you want to see British power up close, watch a Greytail land in a crisis zone and a pallet of supplies, a field hospital, or an evacuation team roll down a ramp with that particular combination of urgency and understatement. The accent is calm, the schedule is not. On land, the British Army went through a rough decade of shrinking formations and delayed programs. But the recent pivot is real. The force is smaller, yes, but it is leaning into protected mobility, sensors, and fires. Boxer mechanized infantry vehicles give soldiers an armored taxi that doesn't rattle like a museum piece. Ajax reconnaissance vehicles, late and loudly criticized, are finally flowing, bringing stabilized sensors that turn a recce troop into a roaming surveillance bubble. Challenger 3 will take a hard look at the tank fleet, upgrading a core of hulls with a new smoothbore gun, modern sights, and active protection to survive in a sky full of drones. It won't be a heavy army in the old sense, but it aims to be a lethal one in the modern sense. Shoot first, move fast, network well. Artillery has moved from a supporting actor to a headliner in the European theatre. Britain's answer is twofold: mobile 155mm guns that can shoot and scoot before drones adjust fire, and deep rockets from tracked launchers that can reach far behind the front line. The multiple launch rocket system fleet is being modernised to accept longer range munitions, and the new wheeled howitzers relearn the old art of massed fires, with a modern twist. Today, a battery doesn't just lob steel. It hunts with loitering munitions, hides under camouflage nets seen only by sensors it can jam, and answers to a data network that treats every drone, radar, and forward observer like a node on a single map. The Army's Ranger units and Special Operations Forces add a scalpel to this hammer, operating with partners and creating dilemmas in places that don't make headlines until they do. Ground-based air defense. Once the neglected cousin at the reunion has come back into fashion with a vengeance. The Sky Sabre system, using the same CAM missile family that protects Royal Navy ships, brings precision, range, and digital brains that can survive in the electronic thicket of a modern fight. Shoulder-fired missiles and mobile launchers fill in the low end, but the long-term goal is a layered shield, from very short range to medium, and with allies out to ballistic missile threats, so that a commander doesn't have to hold his breath every time the enemy's UAV operator gets ambitious. If you've watched European skies lately, you know why batteries and radars are suddenly the bells of the ball. None of this works without cyber and space. The National Cyber Force, built from the DNA of GCHQ and the Ministry of Defence, gives London a quiet option to deceive, disrupt, or degrade adversaries without firing a shot. It is not a magic wand. It is a toolkit, and it pairs with the physical force to make the latter more precise and less predictable. Overhead, UK Space Command stewards secure communications, satellites, and eyes in the sky. Skynet, the military SATCOM backbone, is being refreshed to make sure that when a squadron, ship, or battle group reaches for bandwidth, it gets it, even if someone is trying very hard to say otherwise with interference and noise. In a world where your most dangerous target might be a server farm, and your most precious asset a line of code, cyber and space are not buzzwords. They are supply lines. What about the money? The UK sits among the few NATO members that consistently meet and aim beyond the 2% of GDP benchmark, with a political push to climb higher in the near term. More important than the headline is where the cash goes. Not just shiny new platforms, but stockpiles of ammunition, spare parts, training hours, and the industrial backbone to keep the force in the field. You can buy a jet overnight. You can't buy a qualified maintainer. You can sign a contract for missiles. You can't conjure a factory. Recent policy has shifted toward long-term orders that let industry hire people, expand lines, and deliver at tempo. It's not romantic, but neither is running out of shells on day 3. British power is amplified by British industry. BAE Systems builds ships and designs future fighters. Rolls-Royce provides the nuclear heartbeats for submarines and the turbine muscle for aircraft. MBDA crafts the arrowheads, CAM, ASRAAM, Meteor, Spear, giving the services a menu of options from hush that drone to silence that bunker. Leonardo in the UK works on radars and sensors. Babcock and other yards keep the grey hulls honest and watertight. Kinetics boffins stress and test the science. The map looks like a spider web, from Barrow in Furness, where submarines are born, to the Clyde, where frigates take shape, to Wharton, where jets absorb new tricks, to Bolton, where missiles get their sting. When the state and industry actually sing the same tune, the chorus sounds like capability. Allies are not an afterthought. They're part of the operating system. Within NATO, the UK has been a framework nation in the Baltics, rotating battle groups and reinforcing air policing. The RAF deploys to southern and northern airfields to shepherd NATO skies. The Navy sails with Americans, Dutch, Italians, Japanese, and Australians. The carriers have hosted US Marine Corps F-35Bs. And the shared language is not just English, it's tactics. With the Nordics, the Joint Expeditionary Force gives Britain a rapid response coalition in its own neighbourhood, able to act fast without waiting for every stamp and signature in Brussels. Across the globe, AUKUS deepens technology sharing and signals that the Indo-Pacific's balance isn't a spectator sport for Europeans. With Italy and Japan, GCAP, the Next Generation Combat Aircraft Program, sometimes nicknamed Tempest, ties together three industries on a timeline that speaks of ambition rather than nostalgia. Even the constabulary side of power matters. The Royal Fleet Auxiliary and patrol vessels enforce sanctions, intercept smugglers, and keep the maritime commons honest. Mines are hunted less by men with brooms and more by fleets of autonomous craft and sonar systems that can be launched from a pier, a ship, or, in a pinch, the back of a truck. The British tradition of taking unglamorous tasks seriously turns into real deterrence because an opponent's low-end mischief meets persistent high-end attention. Mischief hates attention. Of course, caveats exist. The Army's headcount is lean, and the housing and retention picture has been, at times, as cheerful as a January beach in Blackpool. The surface fleet has been tight on frigate numbers while the new classes arrive. Air and missile defence at home is improving, but not yet the layer cake planners dream about. Munition stockpiles across Europe, including the UK, were thinner than anyone liked after years of peacetime assumptions. And no matter how hard you push the calendar, you cannot graduate an experienced submarine engineer or a Typhoon pilot in a hurry. Britain's advantage has never been raw mass. It has been readiness, training, and the ability to concentrate high-quality force at the decisive point. That means the system works best when it is adequately funded and constantly exercised. The trend lines, however, tilt up. Carrier deployments have become routine rather than novelty. The undersea enterprise is being expanded and modernized. Aircraft numbers are being husbanded carefully, while sensors and weapons make each tail more lethal. Ground forces are swapping legacy platforms for modular protected mobility built at home. Air defense is being layered. Ammunition orders are sized for seriousness rather than a pleasant press release. And the command circuits, from cyber to space to ISR, are being taught to talk to each other in a single language, faster.
Let's talk teeth, weapons. The missile menu reads like a warning label. At sea and ashore, the CAMM family provides short to medium range air defense with agile kinematics and soft launch signatures that make engineers smile. Meteor gives fighters a beyond visual range reach that compresses an opponent's choices into turn cold or get unlucky. ASRAM cleans up the knife fight. Brimstone punishes armor that lingers in the wrong field at the wrong time. Storm Shadow offers deep strike with a punch designed for the high-value, well-defended things you build only once. A new generation of standoff weapons, electronic warfare pods, and decoys thickens the air picture so that British jets don't have to be Supermen. They just have to be part of a well-timed swarm. It is fashionable to say platforms are less important than payloads. The UK's approach is, why choose? Make the platform good and the payload clever. Training ties all this together. On Salisbury Plain, in the North Sea, in the Norwegian winter, on Baltic ranges and desert flats, British units train with allies to the point where radio shorthand becomes muscle memory. The Navy practices replenishment at sea because a carrier without fuel is a hotel. The RAF practices agile combat employment, operating from smaller, dispersed airfields, because big, predictable runways are invitation cards for missiles. The Army drills combined arms under drone threat, because the battlefield now has a million eyes and a very short fuse. Logistics rehearsals, cyber ranges, live fire packages, joint exercises where someone really tries to jam you. This is the uncinematic, grinded-out work that turns a force from good on paper to bad news in practice. Yes, British kit has a habit of acquiring names that sound like pub quiz answers. Yes, sailors still consider tea a damage control measure. And yes, no matter how advanced the radar, a determined seagull will find a way to ruin someone's morning. But behind the jokes sits a ruthless culture of lessons learned. British officers and NCOs return from operations with sharp notes, and the system, when healthy, turns those notes into changed drills, tweaked code, modified parts, and better briefings. The humor is not a distraction. It's a pressure valve that keeps people sane while they do unforgiving work. Strategically, Britain's aim is clear. Deter in Europe, stay present in the Middle East, contribute seriously in the Indo-Pacific, and protect the homeland, its infrastructure, skies, and data.
The tools support the aim. Underwater, a stealthy trident makes rashness expensive. On the surface, a carrier and its escorts give London options from air policing to strike to disaster relief. In the air, stealth, sensors and tankers turn distance into an inconvenience rather than a veto. On land, a nimble, protected, well-connected army can stiffen allies and punish aggression. In cyberspace and space, the UK denies adversaries the comfort of sanctuary. And throughout, alliances multiply effects, because a destroyer with friends is a flotilla, and a fighter with data from 3 nations is a problem that grows faster than an opponent's oxygen supply. Is it perfect? No force is. The UK must guard against drifting into boutique capabilities that look gorgeous but are too few to matter. It must keep faith with the people who do the work. Pay, housing, family stability, and a career path that makes staying in uniform sane. It must resist the temptation to announce, cut a ribbon, and declare victory before the spare parts arrive. But if the trajectory holds, more munitions, more hulls, modernized armor, layered air defense, deeper magazines for ships and jets, tighter integration with allies, then Britain's already sharp edges get sharper. Here's the other side of power: the ability to help as well as to hurt. British forces have evacuated civilians from collapsing capitals, flown relief to islands after hurricanes, escorted merchant ships through dangerous straits, trained partners who resist aggression, and provided intelligence that prevented bad days from becoming tragedies. The same globemaster that delivers a howitzer can deliver incubators. The same destroyer that screens a carrier can guard a grain corridor. The same cyber operators who can turn off a light can protect a hospital's network. In a world exhausted by grim headlines, that duality matters. So how insanely powerful is the UK's military? The word insane implies wildness. What you actually see is discipline. It's the discipline to keep a submarine at sea every day for half a century. The discipline to sink money into shipyards and missile lines that won't pay off until the next government, or the one after that. The discipline to train with friends until all the radios sound like one voice. And the discipline to admit weaknesses and fix them before someone else exploits them. Britain isn't trying to be the biggest. It's trying to be present, precise, persistent, and allied. In war and peace, that combination punches above its weight. If a crisis pops on the map, London can send steel, sensors, and sovereign decisions, often within hours, always with allies, and usually with a plan B in the back pocket. That is the essence of power. Choice, exercised at speed. The submarine under the waves gives Britain the final word. The carrier on the horizon gives it a loud one. The jet overhead gives it a fast one. The soldier at the checkpoint gives it a human one. Which leaves us with a closing question worth asking out loud. In a century where surprise is cheap and distance is a rumor, who do you want on your side? The loudest, or the one who shows up quietly and on time?